Hi there, I'm Zach Braff.
And I'm Donald Faison.
We're real-life best friends, but we met playing fake-life best friends, Turk and JD, on the sitcom Scrubs.
20 years later, we've decided to rewatch the series one episode at a time and put our memories into a podcast you can listen to at home.
We're going to get all our special guest friends like Sarah Chalk, John C. McGinley, Neil Flynn, Judy Reyes.
Show creator Bill Lawrence, editors, writers, and even prop masters will tell us about what inspired the series and how we became a family.
You can listen to the podcast Fake Doctors, Real Friends with Zach and Donald on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, and wherever you get your podcasts.
This is the Jabberjaw Podcast Network.
What's up, everybody? Hello, I'm Ray Harkins. Hopefully you're doing great on this morning or afternoon or evening or whatever it is that you're doing while you're listening to it. Hopefully you're being safe. If you're riding a bike, make sure you're not weaving in and out of traffic. If you're walking, make sure you're looking both ways before you cross the street. I'm just concerned about your safety because there are definitely times where I'm, out in the world wearing my earbuds, and the people, I put myself in a situation that maybe isn't very safe. But anyways, that's not why you're here. You are here to talk about independent music and raise up this awesome community that we all love and love to be involved in. The guest this week is Misha Mansoor. He plays in a band called Periphery. He does a label called 3Dot Recordings, which is releasing a side project of his called 4 Seconds Ago. That record comes out on September 28th. It's awesome. It's ambient guitar stuff. It's just great. I really, really enjoy it. And I've traveled in the same circles as him. I have seen Periphery play, I think once at some point, and it was high time that we hung out because a very good friend of mine, a future guest in the show, manages them, and so we made it happen, and it was great. So let's talk about some stuff before we launch into the interview, because that's what we do, right? These ideas that I bring up will hopefully kind of inspire some thoughts in you and get you thinking about certain things. But what I need you thinking about first and foremost is band merch. Rockabilia.com will give you 15% off if you use the code PCJabberjaw. Please do that. Not only does it support the show and the network, but you get cool band merch at 15% off. They have over 500,000 items, anything you could possibly want from so many bands. It's unbelievable. Like, I got a old NXS t-shirt. They have Mastodon, Slayer, you name it, they have it. They for sure have Periphery as well. So please go dive in there. Independently run business, open for 30 plus years. They know what they're doing. Fast shipping, great customer service. I can't say enough awesome things about this company because they're awesome. That's it. Simple. So PC Jabberjaw, 15% off. Dive in, and you will be outfitted in band merch, and it's awesome. I am doing a music industry sort of series in the month of October, and one of the episodes I'm doing a mailbag. So if you have music industry related questions, please email the show, 100wordspodcast@gmail.com. I've got a nice selection so far, but I always like to hear what people think. So if you have a idea or suggestion or question or whatever the case may be, please email the show. Okay? Do that. And I have to tell you, I had an interesting musical experience the other night. I went to see a band called Gin Blossoms, which many of you probably are either aware of or tangentially aware of. They were a band that kind of came up in the early 90s, around the time that grunge obviously exploded, and they were that band that was they had a ton of radio hits, and that record New Miserable Experience, if I'm not mistaken, I'm just operating off of memory, but that's the record, and that record had just monster hits. I wouldn't be surprised if it's 5 times platinum or whatever. But I saw that band around that time with my father, and they were great. And I've always revisited that record, and I was like, this band's really good. And it always reminds me of a great movie, too, Empire Records, because one of their songs was a part of that soundtrack. But I was like, you know what? They're playing in the general area, and I thought it would be really interesting to go check them out because, I don't know, are they just a straight-up nostalgic act? I mean, they just released a new record this year. There's a lot of questions I had. So they're playing at a random venue here in Southern California called the Coach House, which is a, seated, it's not technically dinner theater, but they serve food, And it's not it's really, really not like any other like show place that you normally go to when you're watching, independent music. And not like I would really say that Gin Blossoms are independent music per se, but a concert venue, as it were, wasn't a typical experience. But it was so interesting because here I am, 37 years old. I'm old compared to probably most of you who are listening to this show. But I was for sure the youngest person there, with the exception of like a few of my friends who were also there. And it was people probably, I would say, like mid to late 40s, if not older, and completely sold out. $45 ticket. That's expensive, right? Like $45. Fortunately, shout out to my friend Chris for getting me into the show. It was so interesting. They're really good, spot on. Their hits were exactly what they were, hits. And I loved seeing those, but it was just an interesting insight to the fact that a band of that nature can exist, for 20 plus years off of some really, really solid hit songs and, go out there and tour and do the thing and play fairs. And, I don't know, it was just very, very interesting. I would love to sit down with the person in the band and be like, just walk me through it. How, when the goings were rough, was it tough? Did you have to think about hanging it up, or were you still holding on to some royalty checks? Or I don't know. I just find it so interesting. So anyways, enough about that. How about Misha, right? He was a great chat. It was funny because we were, he mentions it in the interview. We were talking and he was like, I got in trouble when I did a podcast a while ago. And I was like, oh, I didn't hear about that. But then I looked it up and I was like, oh yeah, some people, kind of misinterpreted what he said. But yeah, I just found it very funny because, when you're doing a podcast, it's long form. You are talking about a bunch of different stuff rather than just like, hey, here's a pull quote about something crazy this person said. But when you listen to it in context, totally normal. And I guess I'm speaking about the media landscape writ large about that because that happens a lot of the times. But anyways, Misha was a great chat and we talked about a lot of fun stuff. So here that is. And I'll talk to you after the show's over.
And like I was mentioning before that, we existed in the same universe, just had never met. But, looking at you from afar, I always was impressed with how prolific you are in the fact that, you not only just did, Periphery, but you did a lot of partnerships with gear companies and obviously created a lot of music outside of the context of that. I realize this may be a big question to start things off, but, where does that, I guess, kind of hustle come from? Because not everybody kind of has that inside of them. Usually it's come from one thing or another, but can you attribute it to anything on your end?
Yeah, that is a big first question. Let's jump right in. I like it. I'd say it comes from a huge amount of insecurity, imposter syndrome, and this fear of being a failure, I guess. All negative, very negative things. But that's probably where all that comes from to some degree, No,
I like that. I like that.
It's not very uplifting. It's not uplifting at all.
No, but I mean, it's honest. I do think that many people feel that I don't care how successful you are. If you are a A-list movie star or a person that's like, a quote unquote worker bee, there's always that element of feeling like, dude, I shouldn't be here. Why is anybody paying attention to me or whatever?
No, that's been my entire music career because it started out sort of very, just very casually, I guess, because I would just post up on forums and post my music up. And it's obviously something I always wanted, but it's something I also never thought I really deserved. So, as it started to materialize, I was like, oh, wow, like this is happening, that's happening. Better make the most of it because that was totally a fluke. And, lightning will never strike twice. So it's like, just make the most of every situation and try to get as much of it out of it as possible. because you're going to lose it all tomorrow. That kind of, again, it's very negative, but I still feel that way. I still feel like, I think, a big reason why I've tried to create, put my eggs in as many baskets as possible has been because I fear that this could all end tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And I want to not be struggling if and when that happens.
I do think that you speak to core truths of people that, basically once you start to become an adult and start to exist in the world where, bills, responsibilities, whatever, all these things exist. And then, you have to consider the pivot of like, okay, spending, 300 days on the road is a challenging thing for anybody at any stage of life. And then, like you said, coupling it with the idea of, I don't know, this could go away. Like, these headlining tours of 800 to 1,000 cap venues, making $20,000 a night on guarantees. Like, people could wake up and just be like, "Yeah, Periphery's terrible. I don't want to listen to that anymore."
Yeah, but it goes beyond that because that's just one thing. It's like I could lose everything, Sure. And maybe it was my mom who instilled that in me. My parents were very much, my mom especially. They always made sure I didn't take anything for granted.
Sure. So why would you say your mom more, or I guess why was your mom the prevailing influence when it came?
That's just her personality type. She was always a worrywart. I probably got a lot of my anxiety from her. It's probably been a good thing in a lot of ways, but it's been stuff I'm working through otherwise. But like, I think it's also made me very cautious, and that's been very helpful. I've seen a lot of people in this industry sort of have this naive, idealistic kind of view, and I probably had a little bit of that when I was starting out because if nobody had that, no one would ever enter this damn industry. But
right,
it's. But at the same time, I think it did sort of help me keep everyone at arm's length, which is good when I think musicians generally are the kind of people who want to trust, and they're generally good people, so they assume the best of others, and that's like the worst thing that you could do in this industry. And I think that my mom sort of made me very cautious, where other people would have been more open,
Sure.
So, and that, that's just the way she was meshed with me because my brother and sister are different. But
right.
It's we're starting this out on a dark tone, and I kind of dig it. I'm going to be honest.
No, I wouldn't go so far as to call it dark. These are just the things that people go through, and I anytime you're giving a voice to truth, I think that's a good thing. So yeah, I'm glad you're following along. But
I have made a point to try to be as honest as possible when it comes to this industry, and to try to, what I tell a lot of people when we do clinics or we just did our summer camp, is real talk, tell them how it really is, because this industry is tough. Mm-hmm. And it's tough in a lot of ways that people don't, that you would never really fathom unless you were in the situation. And there's just so much going on, and there's so many misconceptions that are thrown around. A lot of which are easy to believe or that are comforting to believe, but are just demonstrably not true.
Right.
And I always believe that it's better off to just rip that Band-Aid off early and to know what you're up against than to sort of delude yourself into trying something and then being horribly disappointed when you're like, wait, this isn't at all what they told me it would be like.
Right.
So that's been my sort of approach as of late, is to sort of just give some real talk.
Of course. Yeah. You got to air the dirty laundry. People have to be aware what they're stepping into. And if you go into a situation with your eyes wide open, it's definitely much easier to, not be shocked, and then also be able to adapt and move past it and be like, okay, that's just what I'm dealing with. So moving right along. But,
Right.
So kind of, putting the focus on you as an individual. So you were, from what I understand, and the, limited internet research that there is out there about you, you are born and raised in Baltimore, right?
No, Washington, D.C.
Oh, okay. So D.C. So
Bethesda, Maryland, to be precise.
Yeah, but I am familiar with Bethesda because my father was born at I think he was born at the Naval Hospital there. But Bethesda.
Oh, okay, yeah. I never say Bethesda because no one would know it.
No.
So Washington, D.C. to most, but yes, you know.
Right. And so, you know, I mean, many people think of like, you know, the DC area, you know, it's weird because it's, you know, clearly the political capital of the world and, you know, the capital of our country. And most people don't view that as like there are suburbs and there are other things going on. But, you know, kind of like what was your sort of upbringing like? I know, like you mentioned, you know, brother and sister, you know, and mother and father in your life, but, you know, kind of paint a picture for me of your upbringing.
I mean, it was, that's a big question with a long answer. To summarize, I'd say, I guess it was fairly normal. I was kind of trying to find myself, and we moved around a bit, which complicated things. You know, when I was 8, we moved to Belgium for 3 years and then came back. And when I was 12 or 13, we moved to Zimbabwe for 2 years, which was pretty wild. And every time you do that, it's kind of like starting again. But it was actually probably toughest coming back because, you know, I wasn't a very popular kid in school. And I definitely ended up hanging out with a more alternative crowd. I didn't get into sort of modern music till I was 12 or 13, maybe 14, around that age. That's when I started getting into rock. And I didn't even have, you know, because I'm the oldest, I didn't really have anyone to show me stuff. I didn't have friends who were into that stuff to show me a lot of music. So I was kind of agnostic to most of it. But, you know, I grew up on like classical music and like Michael Jackson and that kind of stuff. But then once I was exposed to that stuff, you know, then I really wanted to find a way to play guitar, play drums and things like that. And I gravitated towards that sort of scene, whatever that is. You know, and my parents were supportive in that they didn't really understand what, I mean, I don't think any parents would really understand what that's all about. My mom loves music, but not that kind of music. And my dad doesn't listen to music at all. Music is not a thing that he does. So, but again, I didn't think that was weird because when you're a kid, you just think that that's what everyone's upbringing is like. You have a very central worldview, so like,
yeah, for sure. Well, yeah, nothing is weird until you have other people to compare it to, and then you're just like, oh,
yeah, you have no perspective. Right. You have no perspective, and it took me a while to get that perspective. But yeah, I guess that would be my upbringing. You know, in Bethesda where I was, there was an expectation of success. It's one of the best public school systems in the country, so it's very. You know, I remember believing that if I didn't graduate from high school, that I was going to be homeless. That's basically what homeless people were people that didn't graduate and go to college. You know, it was one or the other. You either go to college or you become homeless. Yeah, and I actually believed that. You know? And I'll put it this way: no one ever said that, but they also didn't say that wasn't true. You know, because they were definitely trying to push you into that college system. You were definitely seen as like. You didn't go to college. You were like, that guy. You know, that guy didn't go to college. So I know that's probably different from a lot of school systems, but that's the way it was.
Right. Yeah. You're either educated or destitute. Those are the only two options.
And you know, my dad's a good example of someone who sort of worked his way to whatever success he had. You know, not that he was ever like financially crazy successful or anything, but he always worked a job they loved and was able to, you know, provide for a family and all that. So that's what I thought was the path. And whenever I asked, why do I go to school or whatever, it's because, oh yeah, you go to school so that eventually you can go to college, so that eventually you can get a job and buy a house and start a family. And that's just what I thought was the way that it worked, and I wasn't aware that there were alternatives to that till much later. Yeah. So, you know, that was basically my upbringing. Yeah. So, you know, I went to university for 2 years for no reason. I did just because I thought you had to go, and I kind of hated everything, and I was skipping classes and recording music. You know, on my gaming computer, I just kind of discovered, you can record music at home. This opens up a whole world for me, and I was kind of like, maybe I should take a hint. I hate school. I'm not making any progress here. But here's something I enjoy. I'd rather work full time and do this in my free time. And, you know, my parents were obviously thrilled to hear that, but like, I think they were supportive, like in the fact that they, you know, my dad said, look, the music industry's tough, and, you know, there's no guarantee that no matter what you do, you're going to make it. And I said, look, I have to try. This is something that I'm very passionate about, and I'm not passionate about anything in school, and I'm up against people that are passionate about those subjects. So I don't see why I'd be successful at that. Why not actually try to play to my strengths here? And they were like, all right, well, if you move home, we'll let you live at home, you know, for very cheap rent for Bethesda rates if you get a full-time job. And then in your free time from your job, you can do whatever you want. And if that's music, then it's music. And that's the deal that we had. And that was the happiest that I was at that time.
Right.
You know, I went from a really bad place to a really good place because I finally felt empowered and I was working towards something. You know, and I actually didn't even mind my job. You know, I worked sales at Radio Shack. It was commission, and I was pretty good at it. And it was fun. I liked selling. And I also found that doing that, I could work efficiently. If I sold well, that meant I had more free time to work on music. So I just tried to sell as well as possible and then work like 4 days a week because I could still pay the rent, you know, and still have money left over.
Right.
And it was a good situation. And even if the job got tough or whatever, I always felt like I was working towards something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, plus you felt like you had ownership or authorship of your life because you felt like these were the decisions that you were making that would lead to hopefully a greater goal of what you were shooting for, as opposed to just running the hamster wheel.
Yeah, it's well said. I mean, that's now that I'm talking about it, I realize that's probably the first time that I actually took my life into my own hands. You know, before that, everything was sort of planned out. Even going to university was. Mm-hmm. Not really something I felt I had a choice in, but This was the first time where I took hold of the steering wheel, and it felt good to do that. It felt really good to do that.
Sure. Well, I think, your experience is definitely it's reflective of other people that feel like they, just go to college because they need to bide time, because most, people like you and I who have had the luxury of when I say luxury or the luck of, being exposed to, music and starting to dive into independent subculture, that doesn't happen for everybody. And most kids are just aimless. And so they go to university or college where they're like, I don't know, I just need some more time to figure it out what I like. And it's totally understand that. but people like you and I that find this stuff that catches us, it's like, oh yeah, but I just want to do this. Everything else is just background noise.
But there's also something else there because, I remember asking that question and, when I was in high school, and they're like, yeah, it's fine if you don't know what you want to do. You'll figure it out. Most kids don't. And it made me feel like, oh, okay, I guess that's normal. But really, it's just a scam. It's like, yeah, pay for a year that you won't use, we'll take your money.
Totally.
This is good. You'll be here for 5 or 6 years. That's great for us. And no one sees it that way. What I wish and what I encourage people to do is if you don't really know what you want to go to college for, take a year off, work a job. You'll probably know at the end of that year what you want to do because working sucks, working's tough. And, if you find a path through that work, then that's one thing. But maybe you'll be like, you know what? Compared to this, studying this subject or that subject actually seems like it would be really good, compared to working whatever job you managed to get out of high school.
Right. Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of little things I want to pick out in there of what you were talking about with the, it's that the moves that you made, I presume were directly related to, because your father worked in a lot of different government institutions, correct?
Well, he worked for the World Bank and the IMF and things like that.
Okay, got it. So it sounds like even though the moves were, dramatic and you were going to, different places around the country and you had these opportunities that, a lot of people, have in their head of oh, I can start over. No one's going to know that I'm some closeted nerd or, whatever. I can kind of reshape myself. That experience, like you said, is hard, but I'm sure in many respects also it kind of gave you a little resiliency to, whatever, people having an opinion about you and that sort of stuff.
No, I mean, whenever I started again, it was refreshing because I could do a better version of myself. But I always found it was tough coming back because I always came back to the same school system. So there, my stock hadn't risen, If anything, it had fallen, and it was a battle to sort of get back. It's a weird thing, and I could go on into, I could go on a long tangent about that stuff, but I don't know that it's particularly interesting for what people may be listening for here. But moving sucks, and having to start over is a lot of work.
Yeah.
That's definitely when you're, around that age in those developmental years, it can be challenging. I'm sure there's some benefits that come out of it, but overall, I'd probably say if you can avoid it, don't move.
Right.
When your kids are 8 to 13.
Yeah. No, totally.
If you can.
Yeah. And you, this is me just kind of playing, pop psychology, armchair psychologist or whatever. But you strike me as an obsessive person, and not in a bad way, just in a way that I guess I personally can identify other people because I'm obsessive myself. And so was that kind of how, once you started to, get into music and the sort of the technical aspect of it and the sort of work. The work that you need to put in order to become proficient at an instrument. Is that kind of correct, or did you kind of ease into it?
It's interesting. I mean, yeah, I would definitely say when I get into something, I get into it. And that's kind of all I do. But I also don't have sort of a regimented approach. I tend to just go in without reading the manual and try to figure it out, which is fun for me. Maybe not the most efficient way to learn something, but it offers its own sort of satisfaction, I guess. And that's the way I approached basically everything when it came to this. There would be some aspect of trying to learn on the side or whatever, but really most of the satisfaction and most of the fun came from just sort of jumping in and seeing what happens.
Right. And what was, like you said, you didn't have a strong influence from, your parents or your older siblings in regards to music. So how did stuff kind of especially, of the independent strain and, metal and that sort of stuff, how did that get introduced to you? Was that just you tripping across it on the internet or other people kind of randomly showing?
No, I mean, it was probably hanging with the people I did in middle school or in high school, I guess. Yeah, in high school, I had this guitarist that I played with because I started out on drums, and he introduced me to a lot of stuff like Korn and Slipknot, and it was that new metal era.
Sure.
I think just kind of, and then that rabbit hole opened up. That there's just a whole path you go down from there. That became Dream Theater, Tool, eventually became Meshuggah. It just kind of, and I found that the more progressive stuff always tended to catch my ear. That stuff that was you can do that? Wow, that's amazing. I didn't know that you could do that.
Right. No, that's cool. And like you mentioned, you also were interested in drums when you first started to, kind of play around with stuff. I guess what gave guitar more of a weight to that rather than, focusing your discipline on drums?
University.
Okay.
When I started, I didn't really have a place to practice drums. And I always talk about this. This is one of the major benefits of being a drummer when you start out. Is the people usually practice at your place, so the guitarist would just leave his stuff there because it was just a pain to bring it back. So I had guitars around. He had a 7-string guitar. That was my first exposure to a 7.
iHeartRadio and Grim and Mild present Bridgewater Season 2.
A lot of people now actually believe that there is some kind of mystical force in this region that attracts monsters and paranormal activity.
The Bridgewater Triangle. Now that sounds about right.
You're still denying that there's something beyond our understanding going on here?
Starring Supernatural's Misha Collins, The Walking Dead's Melissa Ponzio, and Rogue One's Alan Tudyk. Written by Lauren Shippen and created by me, Aaron Mahnke.
Something about all of this doesn't feel right.
Hello? Is someone there?
Something went wrong here.
Olivia, we should hurry.
We have a much bigger problem.
What is that?
Olivia, run!
Listen to Bridgewater now on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. And learn more over at grimandmild.com/Bridgewater.
What's up? It's Angela Yee, and I want to tell you about my podcast, Lip Service. I created Lip Service as a safe space for women to talk about whatever they want to when it comes to the bedroom with no judgment. Lip Service means fun conversations and the freedom to talk about whatever you want. Lip Service is the one place where you can hear artists talk about the intimate details of their life and subjects that you might not hear anywhere else. It's where Nick Cannon felt safe enough to open up about some controversial topics with his love life.
The stork is on the way. You know, there's a lot of kids last year.
Oh my God. Also, Lizzo sat down and discussed dating. This was before she was in a relationship.
Oh, we never spoke after that, though.
We want to know why.
Okay, listen.
And even Cardi B came on recently, where she had a great time talking about life before her marriage to Offset.
I thought you wanted a bad and bougie. You got a bad and ghetto.
Make sure you check out my podcast, Lip Service, on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Do you crave a good mystery? Tune in to the Great Detectives of Old Time Radio podcast, featuring episodes of different detective dramas from the golden age of radio every day, Monday through Saturday. The lineup of radio detectives currently includes Sam Spade, Dr. Tim Detective, Dangerous Assignment, Philo Vance, yours truly Johnny Dollar, and Tales of the Texas Rangers. I'm your host, Adam Graham, and I offer commentary and humor after each episode, and also respond to your questions and feedback. Enjoy a good mystery before bed, while driving, or whenever you crave old-school radio goodness. Listen to the Great Detectives of Old Time Radio on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcast, or wherever you get your podcast.
String guitar, but yeah, he'd just leave his gear there. So I'd always be futzing around on that stuff. You know, he even had a little tape 4-track recorder that he would leave there so that we could record songs, and I'd play around with that all the time. So I was the sort of beneficiary of his unwillingness to load his car up every time he'd come. He'd just leave his stuff there, and I had all these toys to play with. And then when I went to university, I was like, well, you know, I've been playing around on guitar. Maybe I should take that more seriously since I can actually practice that every day, unlike the drums. So that became what we did, or what I did.
I am absolutely thrilled to announce this partnership I have with YouTube Music. Now, you've been there just like I have, where you dive down to a rabbit hole and there's so much music to discover on there. You can spend hours exploring new artists and songs. Now, there's an app to make it so much easier. YouTube Music is a brand new music streaming service, combining everything you would expect from a streaming service with the magic of YouTube to bring it all to life. They make it easy to find the music you're looking for, whether it's official albums, singles, music videos, live performances, and even covers and remixes. You don't know the song's name? Search by the lyrics. Super simple. The app gives you recommendations based on taste, location, and time of day, and you can easily find the music trending around you no matter where you are. And with YouTube Music Premium, it's even better. So you can get ad-free music that plays with the screen on or off while using other apps. Enjoy your music wherever you want it, even when you're offline. Download the new YouTube Music app today and start a 30-day free trial. Then enjoy music for just $10 a month. Of course, terms and restrictions apply, but YouTube Music, it's all here. This service is incredible. I love it, okay? Go. Download the app. Try it out. Super, super awesome, okay? Thank you, YouTube.
I guess technically, is Periphery kind of like your first band, or did you have other sort of band playing show experiences before that?
So it's funny. I had one band so I went to University of Toronto for a couple of years. I had one band there, and we were called Bulb. And anyone who's listening here who knows that as my nickname, that's where it comes from.
Got it.
The band was called Bulb. I started up a page for it, and I was uploading songs there, but that band broke up. I started with my best friend at the time, who was a guitarist, and he, we had some writing chemistry, but he wanted to take things in one direction, I wanted to take it in another, and it's that sort of classic story. It sort of ripped down the middle. And I actually haven't talked to him since. Not that I hold anything against him. It just that's the way that
life moves
worked
on.
out, I guess. Yeah. But it definitely ended our friendship, which sucks. So that made me kind of jaded to that, and was like, all right, maybe, I think I always had a pretty clear vision of what I wanted, and once I started recording on the computer, it gave me a tool to actually create that vision and see it out the way I wanted. So then I was like, well, maybe with this I can just get things done the way I want, and rather than try to express my vision through weird abstractions and conversation, like, oh man, I want it to sound kind of like this, and then, I could actually just show people what I wanted it to sound like, give them a concrete example of it.
Right.
And that ended up being a huge benefit, because then, people with who that resonated with, if they gravitated towards that and then joined up, they couldn't come in and be like, okay, but I think now we got to change it and be like this. It was kind of this understanding, like, no, you've got a vision for it, and I dig that, and we're going to move along that path. And I think that was really helpful.
You saying all of that, like that really just triggered something in my head, because I think that really was a huge shift in independent music once, the advent of, the at-home recording. I mean, people always did at-home recordings, but, basically whatever, early 2000s is when things really started to shift. Because, I mean, I played in a hardcore band from like 97 till about 2004. And, we toured and we did our thing, but like it was definitely always, us in a room hashing stuff out. And like you said, the idea of combining visions and, this person wanted to be more heavy, this person wanted it to sound more like Snapcase or whatever. But if you, in the same way that like, I don't know, just randomly comparing you to like a person like Larry David, who's like, okay, I know what I want Seinfeld to be like, here, let me show you these things or whatever. So like that auteur theory really can take hold in many different respects with independent music. And like you said, you can kind of get people on the same page much quicker than just being like, oh yeah, I guess we're going to like hopefully strike gold with these, 4 or 5 people in a room. And because that's hard.
And ironically, all I ever wanted was to have a band to jam with. I didn't want to be the guy. I just wanted to play in a band. And to me, the idea of like getting in a room with like-minded musicians, jamming things out, having them evolve, which I did. Like I did see that happen to some degree, and I always thought that was awesome. I loved that, but it always seemed to fall apart at some point, and then sometimes beyond the point of repair. Right. So it just seemed like maybe the easiest way to get what I wanted would be to approach it backwards and to kind of
reverse engineer.
Reverse engineer and be like, okay, well, this is the vision. This is how I'm going to basically put out what I'm chasing, and then if people join up, they know the deal. And then hopefully we can work that into sort of a collaborative thing. That was always the goal.
Yeah. No, I like that, because I mean, essentially it's the same principle of, like you said, getting people in a room, but all you're doing is like you have rather than like this esoteric examples of like, okay, I want to sound like Hatebreed meets Meshuggah, like because all you're talking about is generalities. You're like, well, what do you like about Hatebreed?
Right, exactly.
Right, and so like to actually impact.
But if you hear the song, you're like, oh, okay, I see what you're doing there, and right. I dig that, and therefore, I'm coming and understanding that this is a vision.
Yeah. No, it makes total sense. And like I said, I really didn't think about it in those terms from the ability of bands to start with that focal point in mind, rather than of course, clearly there's an evolution of Periphery over the years, but to have that starting off blueprint is much easier than being like, all right, 3rd record in. Now we figured out who we are. Not saying because you.
Yeah, and it did make all the difference. So that's why my only other band was ever that other band, because it made all the difference.
Yeah, no, for sure. I like that. I just, like I said, it shook something loose in my head. I was like, I never really considered that, but yeah, it makes total sense. Doing, kind of looking at where most people identify the music that you play, technical metal, gent, whatever you want to call it. There are a lot of people who, and this is me playing sort of devil's advocate argument here. A lot of people view this sort of technical aspect of shredders and people who are using 7-string guitars as being like, okay, like cool, they're really talented at what they do, but like there's no feeling behind it. There's no, you're just, it's masturbatory, just like, doing the guitar stuff you're doing and stuff like that. Clearly that is something you disagree with. And I presume that you've had discussions with people that, kind of come at you like that, with being like, oh, it's really, like technically you guys are really good, but like, I don't feel it in the way I feel like, whatever, name other band A, B, and C. Have those been discussions that you've had at all? Or is that something that just doesn't come on your radar?
Not really. I mean, it's funny that the technical aspect of the band is not something that concerns me. I don't care if people think we're technical or not. I never have. The bands, I'll give you a great example of a band that I think does it right. Six, if you're familiar with them.
Yep.
They are masters of the riff. But what I think they did so well was, they put out this album, Death of a Dead Day, which was really like just one of my favorite albums of all time. And what I remember thinking was like, these are just great songs, and these are engaging songs. And then when I sat down to learn them on guitar, because I wanted to learn some of the riffs, I was like, wow, this stuff's really technical. But my first takeaway was that they were good songs. And that always stuck with me. That's the goal. The goal is not to make it about technique. And I think I'd agree with a lot of people. Like, a lot of this stuff is sort of masturbatory. It's sort of how technical, how fast. And that's not the point. The point should be, in my opinion, to craft good songs and cool songs. That should be the goal. And I think that's the disconnect, is a lot of people have trouble or don't really consider the song. They want it to be about the riff. Or about the part, or a way to sort of show what you can do.
Right.
If I have any critique of our earlier stuff, is that it definitely is guilty of that at times.
Sure.
It's definitely, and then that makes sense with the debut. There was an aspect of like here we are, check us out,
Right.
But and that pressure is gone. But we've never, even back then, we never cared about technicality. Like, I'm not a great guitarist. I make do with what I have. I just want to write music. I tell people this all the time. I don't even consider myself a good musician. I just enjoy it. It's something I do. I enjoy it. And a good analogy is I'm not that great at video games, but I love video games and I play them all the time.
Right.
So, the fact that I don't consider myself that good at it doesn't mean that I don't want to do it. It's something that I do very selfishly. And I don't really care if people think it's technical. I don't care if they think it's good or not. I'm still going to do it.
Yeah. Oh, first, no, it's a good analogy because, it's not everybody is going to, be the A+ master of whatever it is that they're doing. But it's like, if you're proficient and you get the job done and you enjoy it, then like, why would you limit yourself? You'd be like, oh, I'm not a master.
Yeah.
So I'm not like, I'm not like Terry Bozzio on drums. It's like, well, no one can be, because he is who he is, and you just do your own thing of it.
Right. And for me, technique and all that stuff is really just a tool to get the ideas out of my head efficiently, and to maybe be able to get away with ideas that I can't get away with now, to sort of push. If there's an idea where it does require technical skill to pull off, but I think it sounds good, that's something worth chasing. But not just for the technique. Like, if it's just like, oh, that's a techie sounding riff, and man, the fans will really love that. Man, they're going to say that's hard to play. Like, that's not interesting to me. And I'm very rarely interested by music that sort of is born of that thought process.
Yeah, for sure. No, it makes sense. So as you started to play shows and be on stage and, take this vision that you worked on, with others out there, were you nervous to play on stage and stuff like that? Was that a difficult transition for you, taking it, out of the proverbial bedroom and garage?
I I always thought I'd be nervous to play on stage. And I think I was always nervous about being nervous. Like, I was always nervous right before we'd go on stage, because I'm like, man, I feel like I'm going to be so nervous. And then the second I got on stage, it's like you don't even have time to be nervous. You're setting up, and then you start, and you just enjoy it. So I never really had problems with that. It was more nervous about being nervous, if that makes sense.
Right. The nerves before of like, oh, I think I'm going to be nervous. But
right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. True. It is. Always...
And then when I actually get onto the stage, then I'm always surprised that there's no nerves. It just felt very natural immediately.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Because then once you're up there, you're not thinking about anything. A lot of it just is instinctual and based off of feeling. And yeah,
but I would freak out because I thought I would get up on the stage and like freeze and like, you know, have like a mini panic attack or something.
Right.
But
or you forget the songs.
On the contrary, I was always taken aback by how sort of just like it felt like almost like nothing. It just felt like, oh, on stage. Well, we better get started, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. We got 30 minutes to play. Let's do this.
Let's do this. Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, something I always find interesting, because I know a lot of people have their moments in their head of where, you know, the thing that they're doing starts to, you know, attract people and people start to identify with it. You know, once you started to, you know, tour and put out records and take it out there, you know, do you have, they don't have to be moments that are as like crystallized as like, oh, I remember the first time we sold out a venue or whatever. You know, do you have those moments in your head where it's just like, oh my gosh, like, I guess this thing that, you know, that I was just thinking about in my head is now out there and people are identifying with it. Do you have any moments that kind of stick out of that sort of elicit that feeling?
Yeah, but they were always tempered with that feeling of like, but you don't deserve any of this. And it's all going to go away. So I don't know that I was ever able to fully enjoy that. I don't ever really allow myself to fully enjoy those moments, you know, which I'm sure something I'd probably need to work out with my therapist, but
yeah, maybe take a breath.
That's always been an aspect. That's always been an aspect of it, I think.
Right. But I mean, like whatever, removing the notion of you not allowing yourself to enjoy anything. Like, are you have those moments of like the, you know, a tour that stood out early in your, you know, band's life or whatever that was like, oh wow, like this is really meaningful.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's some shows that have stood out, you know, like one of the first shows that we played in Tokyo, that we headlined a very small club, like maybe like 250 people. Mm-hmm. But it was packed and it was, you know, it was sold out. It was just crazy energy in there. Crazy energy, no barricade. That was one of my favorite moments on stage.
Nice.
You know, other ones would be like playing London and Manchester. The last time we were there, massive shows, and the energy coming from the crowd is literally palpable at that point. Like you feel something, right. And that is something that you don't. Not only you don't always feel, but it's rare to feel at that sort of degree.
Sure.
And those were special. Those are the moments that sort of stick with you. And there's tons, you know, there's just touring is a whole thing, but there are some really special moments that come from touring and some really unforgettable sort of feelings and moments where I'm just sitting back. Like we have this joke where, you know, if someone's complaining about something on tour, we'll always just kind of just joke around being like, you know, like let's say they complain about something silly. It'll be like, oh, I have to tour the world with my friends. You know?
Yeah.
I just kind of make fun of them. Because ultimately, you know, it's like, oh, man, that sucks. I have to hang out with my friends every day and play music with them. Oh, you know. And, of course, that's not to say that you don't have problems and that they aren't real, but it's just it does kind of also highlight the absurdity of what it is that we're doing to some degree. Like, yes, it is a lot of work, but it is a lot of work centered around the fact that we are hanging out with our best friends and playing music.
Yeah, right. It's always like, keeping things in perspective. But actually, that dovetails nicely because I was going to talk to you about your probable evolution on touring, and because when you first start to do it, it's clearly exciting, and you're kind of running off of adrenaline and endorphins as you have all these different experiences. But then over time, it evolves into like, okay, well, technically this is kind of like my office and my workspace. It looks different than many other people's, but it kind of flows into that element of work. But how has touring kind of evolved in your head from either an aspect of like, I used to enjoy it, I do it now because I have to, or like, it's probably a mixture of a lot of those things.
Well, it's pretty interesting. Again, I'm probably just going to give some real talk here, but
I love it.
We took a year off to do this album, but a large part of it was because at the end of last year, last few tours I did, like the European one and the headliner, which were, by the way, pretty ideal tours in and of themselves, and were good times and whatever. I don't know if it was me, where I was in my life, or just being burnt out or what, but I was like, guys, I'm not enjoying this, and I'm going through the motions. And, I don't know if I want to do the next tour. Like, I don't want to quit the band. I love writing, and I love writing with the guys, but I don't know if I want to tour anymore. I don't know if it's for me, because the cons are starting to outweigh the pros. And, that's something that the band took very seriously. And I think some of them were getting burnt out, and not as severely as me, but they were feeling some of the things. And, it was suggested, it's like, well, maybe we need to just take some time away, and maybe we take that time to like make an album and to spend more time on an album than we ever had the luxury to do before. But I needed that. I needed that really bad. Because if we had another tour, I would have sat it out and been like, yeah, let's hire a fill-in. I don't want to do that.
Sure.
So, and I'm really lucky to have, a group, have my band be so supportive and understanding. Like they're people I can talk to about anything. That's not an easy conversation to have at any point with anyone, but they were very understanding, very supportive, and basically found the perfect solution immediately. So, I do consider myself very lucky to have that support system.
Sure.
But, it worked well. And I will say this, time away does make me more excited about the prospect of touring.
iHeartRadio and Grim and Mild present Bridgewater Season 2.
A lot of people now actually believe that there is some kind of mystical force in this region that attracts monsters and paranormal activity.
The Bridgewater Triangle. Now that sounds about right.
You're still denying that there's something beyond our understanding going on here?
Starring Supernatural's Misha Collins, The Walking Dead's Melissa Ponzio, and Rogue One's Alan Tudyk. Written by Lauren Shippen and created by me, Aaron Mahnke.
Something about all of this doesn't feel right.
Hello? Is someone there?
Something went wrong here.
Olivia, we should hurry.
We have a much bigger problem.
What is that?
Olivia, run!
Listen to Bridgewater now on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. And learn more over at grimandmild.com/Bridgewater.
What's up? It's Angela Yee, and I want to tell you about my podcast, Lip Service. I created Lip Service as a safe space for women to talk about whatever they want to when it comes to the bedroom with no judgment. Lip Service means fun conversations and the freedom to talk about whatever you want. Lip Service is the one place where you can hear artists talk about the intimate details of their life and subjects that you might not hear anywhere else. It's where Nick Cannon felt safe enough to open up about some controversial topics with his love life.
The stork is on the way. You know, there's a lot of kids last year.
Oh my God. Also, Lizzo sat down and discussed dating. This was before she was in a relationship.
Oh, we never spoke after that, though.
We want to know why.
Okay, listen.
And even Cardi B came on recently, where she had a great time talking about life before her marriage to Offset.
I thought he wanted a bad and bougie. You got a bad and got a...
Make sure you check out my podcast, Lip Service, on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Do you crave a good mystery? Tune in to the Great Detectives of Old Time Radio podcast, featuring episodes of different detective dramas from the golden age of radio every day, Monday through Saturday. The lineup of radio detectives currently includes Sam Spade, Dr. Tim Detective, Dangerous Assignment, Philo Vance, yours truly Johnny Dollar, and Tales of the Texas Rangers. I'm your host, Adam Graham, and I offer commentary and humor after each episode, and also respond to your questions and feedback. Enjoy a good mystery before bed, while driving, or whenever you crave old-school radio goodness. Listen to the Great Detectives of Old Time Radio on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcast, or wherever you get your podcast.
The new stuff that we've been working on makes me very excited about playing that stuff live. I don't know how I'll feel, so it's very possible at the end of the next tour that I might be like, no, it's the same as last time. But maybe all I did need was just a break. Maybe I was just getting burnt out.
Yeah.
Everyone has a different tolerance for touring, so and it's tough. It's its own thing, you know. Some people can stay on the road all year long and can't get enough of it. Some people can't handle it at all, and I think I'm somewhere in between. So it's maybe I am getting burnt out for good, or maybe I was just getting burnt out then, and I just needed that break, and I'll be good to go. But we'll find out, I suppose.
Yeah, no, totally.
In a world where everyone is confined to their homes, society begins its largest binge watch to date. In the hallowed library of Hulu, or perhaps on a shelf of DVDs you haven't looked at in a decade, is a show that perfectly encapsulates life in the early aughts and launched a friendship that would inspire millions. Hi, I'm Zach Braff.
And I'm Donald Faison.
In 2001, we starred in Scrubs, a sitcom that revealed a glimpse of what it was like to survive a medical internship. As Turk and JD, we explored guy love.
Nearly 20 years later, a lot has changed. We're not Supermen, but we're still best friends. Given the mandatory lockdown, there's no better time to relive the series that brought us together in the first place. And we're doing it with a podcast.
That's right, people. We're going to bring friends and crew members and fellow cast members and writers. And guess what? We're going to even invite some of you to call into the podcast and ask all the questions you want of the entire Sacred Heart staff.
Join us for Fake Doctors, Real Friends on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, and wherever you get your podcasts.
But I do think a lot of it, basically just has to do with who a person is, like the whole, whatever, extrovert, introvert, clearly introverted people, that's a tough ask for them to be around people, literally 17 hours of the day in small confines. And then if they're not in small confines, they're, located a 4-block radius around a venue. And it's like, you can't expect people like that to look at the notion of touring and be like, you know what, that sounds like a great idea. For 9 months out of the year, I'm just going to be overrun with people, and that's a hard lift.
We weren't even touring that much, but it's just all of the aspects of touring, because it's tough. But when you go to Europe for 5 weeks and you're really hustling and it's a tough tour for a number of reasons, and it's just kind of taking it out of you. And at the end of it all, you find out that you walked away with no money, for 5 weeks of work. It's just, it's very demoralizing. So, and that's not to say that we always make no money from tours. European tours are very expensive. That one was routed particularly terribly, but, there's a lot of things that go into touring. And I think at that point in time, at least, I was just feeling like, man, if there's another tour, I'd rather just stay home. But luckily, right now, especially with this new material, I know some of the guys in the band can't wait to get back out on the road, because for them, this break's been maybe a bit more torturous than it has been for me. But
yeah, totally.
But I actually genuinely can say that, especially for I think the next tour we do will be playing new songs, and that'll
give a shot.
Really excited.
Yeah, that.
Yeah, and well, in general it would, but then there's also just some of these songs I think will work so well live.
Nice.
That I'm just excited.
Yeah, to be able to, anytime you're introducing something new into, what it is you're doing, you always feel, that's why every band's new record is the best record they've ever wrote, because it's recency bias. They're like, oh, yeah, this is the best thing you ever wrote. And it's like, yes, it is right now. And then you'll have perspective on it. But that doesn't matter, because what you're experiencing recently is the most important. Like, that's the reality of the world we live in. But
I'd argue differently for Periphery, but yeah.
no, that's I argue away.
Like our album got better and better as we went on. Our first ones are worse, and our last ones are best. And this is with 2 years separating us, and a new album, and the one we're working on, I think, is our best. I think probably a lot of people will hate it, but who cares?
Right, exactly. Well,
my favorite. It's definitely my favorite. It's my favorite experience recording. The best the band's ever written, gotten along. And we finally had the time to sort of do all the iterations and changes that we want and look at these songs, after spending some time with them.
Right.
So I'm sure a lot of people say it's our worst or that they hate it, but that really doesn't matter, because I'm stubborn, and when I think something is good, I think it's good, and when I think something sucks, I think it sucks.
Right.
So our first album is our worst album, and this last one is our best.
Yeah.
Objectively. And if you disagree, you're wrong.
Right. which some would argue, well, Misha, obviously you're going to say that because you're so close to it. You know all of the ins and outs of it. Clearly you wrote it, and clearly you had this experience. And then a person that can listen to the record once through can really have a more informed opinion of your record than you can.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's all sounding like you're talking like music is subjective or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't talk crazy.
I know.
Don't talk crazy talk, man.
It's so weird, right? Yeah,
right, very weird.
Art is only one thing and one thing only. Okay.
Yeah, that's the way I likes it.
Exactly. Last thing I wanted to really kind of hit on was the. Clearly as people, put a focus on, all the musical projects that you put out there, everyone, well, not everyone, but there's a subset of people that just get, obsessed about, gear and the way that, you record stuff and the way that, your guitar sounds playing through a certain amp or a pedal. I could be no further removed from that. I screamed in all the bands that I played in, and if I ever went into a Guitar Center, I just wanted to leave immediately. So the gear obsession is foreign to me, but I imagine that, they're clearly you like gear, you are a fan of it, but, I'm sure that there are moments where people, just constantly punish you on information about your gear, your pedals, and all that sort of stuff. And you kind of just want to maybe step away from that and be like, well, did you listen to the songs or anything? Or do you not have a relationship with a lot of people like that? No,
I'm a gear nerd, so I'm always happy to talk about gear. I'm the polar opposite of you when it comes to that.
Nice.
I've always been fascinated, and I started with so little. So I'm kind of both sides of this, because on one hand, I do see this tendency for people to want to buy their way out of problems. So it's like, oh, I've got a problem, but if I buy this thing, that problem will go away. When usually it's just user or lack of knowledge or lack of skill, right? I started with nothing, with a Behringer V amp and the sound card in my computer, and I was able to extract just about everything I could get out of that when I was starting out. And then I got a pod, and eventually, I have more gear than anyone should rightfully have right now, but that's slowly built up over the what is it now, 2018, 16 years I've been doing music. So it's easy to look at it now and be like, oh, he's a gear whore. And yeah, I am. Let's be honest, I am. But I also think I started out the right way, which is to try to understand. When I got an Axe Effects for the first time, I knew exactly what I was getting into, and I had no trouble dialing it in because I'd, used the Line 6 Pod X3 and the XT to the full extent of what they could do. And then when I got this thing that was better, I understood why it was better, and I understood exactly what I could get out of it immediately. And it was just this huge upgrade, and I was crazy about it. And I still love the Axe Effects. But I can't tell you how many people then will get an Axe Effects, hit me up and be like, man, I don't know how to make this thing sound good. And it's like, man, I don't have solutions for you there. If you can't get this thing to sound good, then maybe it's just not the thing for you,
Right.
And I think a lot of people, I also see that side because I've definitely been guilty of that too, of just going crazy with gear, being like, that'll solve the problem. And then quite honestly realize, no, it doesn't. It doesn't solve the problem at all. It might give you a different flavor. It might make, some workflow thing easier. And it'll help a little bit here or there. But really, like, the thing you got to work on is you, which sounds so cliche and gross. I don't want to end things that way.
No. I was gonna ask one more thing after that, but yeah.
Yeah. That's just terrible.
Misha, I have to admit, I really appreciate the fact that you think about this thing in context. You're like, I don't want the button on the interview to be the last negative thing. I like that. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
The last thing that I actually am going to ask you was the notion of like what you were talking about when you were butting up against, going into, college and kind of going through the motions and, your parents, being supportive and saying, hey, you can move home and stuff like that. And, kind of pursue these two things in conjunction with one another. How does their relationship, with you and, your success that you've had in music world that they, presumably don't understand? Is it one of those things where they're just like, hey man, you keep doing you. That's awesome. I mean, we don't understand it. Like, do they come to shows? Like, how's that whole thing kind of suss itself out?
Well, it's interesting. My dad, my parents were supportive, but they were responsibly supportive. My parents have always been the people who didn't believe in giving me a handout. They wanted to help, but they were like, you're not getting anything for free. Like, for example, when I came out of school, they could have just been like, okay, you can live at home. But they wanted to charge me rent, not because they needed the money, but they wanted me to not be lazy. They're like, if you're going to use music as an excuse to be lazy, then we're not going to be part of this. But if you work and get a full-time job and you want to do music in your free time, then that's fine. And you're going to pay us rent because that's what people do in the real world. They pay rent, And I'm grateful for that. They never gave me anything outright. They would always help me. Another example, like my first real guitar was this Les Paul. My buddy was selling a Les Paul. He bought for $2,000. He had to sell it. He was selling for $1,000. I was like, it's the best deal ever. It's half price. I don't have the money. And I was in high school. They're like, all right, well, we'll loan you the money to get the guitar, but you're going to work a summer job this summer. And if you don't make enough to pay for the guitar, we're going to sell the guitar. So I worked that summer and I bought that guitar. And those skills are really what they wanted me to learn. And I'm really grateful. I think that was the best support that I ever could have gotten. And that plus sort of me dropping everything and chasing it. It's not that my parents were against it. They just wanted to make sure that, one, I wasn't going to be lazy, and two, I knew what I was up against. But, after that, my dad's always told me he's really proud of me for kind of going against the grain and really just taking that leap of faith there, because it was scary. And he knows that it was scary. And he had to do something kind of similar in his job at one point as well. Around that time, it was a kind of an interesting parallel. And it worked out, in somewhat similar ways. But, right. He's always told me that he's been very proud of me. And my mom too. I think that whatever might have been disguised as them not supporting me was just concern. And in hindsight, very, very rightful concern. I probably would tell someone or I have told people who are interested in this industry the exact same thing, or even worse, because I'm aware of so much more than they were,
Yeah, totally.
And again, this has gotten misconstrued so many times. I've gotten shit for people saying I'm complaining about the music industry. I'm complaining about being in a band. And that's a lie. The music industry has been great to me. I have an awesome life. You just need to know what you're up against. I'm trying to educate people because there's this myth that like, oh, to make it in this industry, you just have to want it really bad and work really hard, and just have passion and be dedicated. Just be, all this motivational bullshit. It's all crap. That's not true. That's baseline. That's baseline stuff right there. Anybody who isn't doing that isn't even playing the same game that you are. So everybody who's in here who has an actual shot is working hard, is giving it everything that they got. That's your actual competition. So that's where you start. That's your lottery ticket. And then you go from there. And this industry owes musicians nothing. It owes talent nothing. The most talented musicians never make it, or if they do, it has nothing to do with their talent. It has everything to do with everything else. And a lot of times it has to do with their business smarts. Whatever big business acumen you have will help. And unfortunately, a lot of that is innate. I never took business classes. I don't know why I'm the way I am. I don't know why I've seen it. It might just be dumb luck on my part. I may not even be good at business. I don't know. But I've had good luck in this industry. And then with that luck, I've been able to capitalize on it.
Sure.
But that's the lesson. And people don't like hearing that because I'm basically a dream crusher. I'm saying like a lot of these guys are not going to make it. You aren't. It's not the hard work. The hard work that's a given. That's where you start. The luck, what you do with that luck, your team, the everything, the luck that just seems impossible and seems to work out several times in a row. Like if I had to start a band again, I wouldn't, because it would be impossible.
Right.
Knowing what I know, and this is why I said in the beginning that naive idealism. You need a bit of that, because if you knew what I knew, you probably wouldn't start a band.
Right. No, totally. You get.
I'm not trying to. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna say you have to be a young dumb kid in order to do that stuff, because you don't have any worries, you don't care, and that's fine. And that's, like you said, that's the place that you need to start off with, rather than this whatever, a grizzled old veteran at the age of 35 or 36 that has seen the music industry. It's like, oh yeah, you would never do it again.
Right. And so I'm not discouraging that, and I think people should definitely try. But if you're going to try, I think it's good that you know what you're up against. I think it's important that you like with anything else, just say be prepared. Be prepared. And how can you be prepared if you don't know what you're actually up against? If you have some delusion about how this industry works, and it's also ever changing, and it's as cutthroat as ever, and there's less money than there ever was in it. So. If money is a concern, if you're getting into the music industry and you're saying, I don't want a lot of money, I just want to make enough to get by. If I could even make like 40, 50K a year, understand that netting 40, 50K a year after taxes, after everything, is crazy right now. If you're, if you're in any style of music, unless you're like a solo artist, and even then it's hard, but it will be maybe 4 times easier,
Yeah.
But and when I say solo artist, I don't mean you have a band that you pay out. I mean that you're like a DJ or something.
Yeah, you're the only human being getting paid.
You're the only human being that gets paid. But it's so tough, and there's more competition than ever. So again, not complaining, not discouraging people. Just know what you're up against so that you have a fighting chance when those opportunities come.
And I think to your point too, it's all about, and I mean, most of life is about this, of managing expectations. If you come in, clear eyed to a scenario where it's just like, I want to do this thing because I like it, and I want to build my life around it because I like it. And yes, I'm going to take a, transitory job working at a bagel shop because I just want to be able to tour, and they'll allow me to tour. That's cool. And that's fine. But you need, like you said,
that's the right attitude.
Right. Exactly.
That's the right attitude.
Because you just...
The attitude of I need to make it in 3 years, and I need to be making this amount of money.
Get out.
And I want this. It's dude, don't even bother.
No.
Because you're going to lose to the guy who doesn't care about that stuff.
Right. Right.
Because they're going to try, and they'll actually take the opportunities. They're not... If you focus on money you're not going to get it. You're gonna be disappointed really, really early on. You're going to have a bad time.
Yes.
And you're getting into it for the wrong reason, because it's just like, if you want to make money, you're picking basically the worst industry. You know?
Totally. Like, dude, there's something that's called Wall Street and finance and banking. Like, if you're looking to make money, like, just like do that. And, you know, like, probably.
And those you can do a lot better with a lot less work and a lot less heartache. So just do that.
Yeah.
If you wanna make music because you're passionate about it, you definitely can. And if you're lucky and you play your cards right, you might be able to make a little bit of money. And if you're smart about it, what you'll do is start trying to get as many income streams going as early as possible, because you'll know that you won't be able to count on your band alone to help you survive.
Yep.
And between all of those things, you might be able to carve out a living for yourself, or you might not, you know.
Yeah.
But if you're going to give it a shot, at least give it the best shot, and give it a fair shot relative to what the industry is really like, not some crazy shot based off of a delusion.
Yeah. Oh, totally. And the idea of like, yes, you know what you can also do? You can also, like, you know, work a job that you enjoy and still be creative. Like, you know, there's this like weird mutually exclusive world that people feel like they need to live in, where it's like, oh, I can't do that. I can't pursue that as heavily as I can, you know, if I have a job and I'm taking time away. It's like, well, yes, but most people then are confronted with the idea of like, oh, I'm too tired after work or whatever. And it's like, well, that's your decision, you know, like, yes, you may be too tired, but like, do you still want to be creative? Then just focus on that.
I mean, I hate to say it, but if that's the problem that you're having, then maybe it's just not for you, because
it's true. Yeah.
You know, it didn't matter how tired I was or how little sleep I was getting when I was working my job. When I got home, I couldn't wait to get started on music.
Right.
Like, you couldn't keep me away from that stuff. It wasn't like, oh, you know, well, I'm tired, maybe I'll do something else. Like, that wasn't part of the equation. That was where my job really started.
Right. No, I love that mentality, because it does. Yeah. If people feel like the creative thing that they're pursuing is, you know, turns into like the quote unquote work that most people do because they have to, you know, make a living or whatever, it's like, oh, that's awful. Like, your creative side should give life to every other aspect of your life.
But, you know, I'll bring this back to an even broader point, which, again, probably a lot of people won't like to hear, but it's the truth. And maybe you'll forgive me for saying this down the road when you realize that I'm right. But this job is not for everybody. It's not for most people. Most people who try this will not make it. And even if they had the opportunities, they wouldn't, because they wouldn't enjoy it, or they wouldn't like it once they see what it really is and what it takes. And that's not saying anything about you as a person. It's like, it's not saying anything more about why that person prefers chocolate to vanilla or vanilla to chocolate. People are just different. And this job requires a certain type of person, and some people are cut out for it and some people aren't. The lie is that everyone can do it and that everyone who wants it can make it happen. And that lie is propagated by all sorts of things, basically institutions, schools, anyone who stands to make a buck from people believing that. But the truth is, it isn't. Just in the same way as with any job, you know? Like, would I be cut out to be on Wall Street? Probably not, you know? Does that make me a shitty person? I don't think so. It just means that that's not what I was cut out to do. Or to be a doctor or a lawyer? No. And some people are. And some people will be very successful at being those things. So I think it's just, you know, it's just important to note that, like, yeah, everyone who's interested should try. But they should realize, they should also know when to quit. They should know when to call it, when it's like, all right, maybe this is just a hobby for me. Maybe I'm much happier if this is a hobby. Yeah. I don't try to force it a career that will never happen.
Totally.
Which would make you miserable trying to do it. And if you enjoy it as a hobby, you'll at least enjoy it.
Yep. Totally. You have to be aware enough to know your strengths and weaknesses. And yeah, if you're bad at math, you shouldn't do stuff that is a focal point of math. And if you're bad at, you know, whatever, right, playing guitar, then that should probably not be the focus of your career. It's like, well, yeah, I guess you could
exactly.
I guess you could work hard at it, but it doesn't mean that you're going to be successful at it. So yeah, I appreciate the real talk, Misha.
Yeah, no problem, man.
But yeah, dude, thank you so much. This has been fun. I knew I was going to enjoy this chat, and yeah, you delivered in spades.
Thank you very much, man. I appreciate it.
Yes. Thank you, Misha. I appreciate you hanging out and being so chill to talk to, you know? Thank you very much to Monica, his publicist, for helping this interview come along. I always appreciate when people think that this podcast is worth their while, and I really enjoy that aspect. So thank you very much to everybody involved from that perspective. Next week, we have, this is actually a conversation that was, no joke, like 9 months in the making. It was ridiculous. Basically, we had competing schedules. He was available, I wasn't. I was available, he wasn't. It just kept going back and forth like that, but we finally did it. Donovan Milero, he is the drummer / vocalist for a band called Hail the Sun, which is part of this really, really interesting music scene that is like, it's like prog, but also has like a punk and hardcore influence. It's really, really interesting. I'll talk a lot more about it next week, but Donovan was a great chat, and yeah, we went to a lot of fun places. So that is what's next week. All right. Do you hear that plane in the background? Yeah, I think I'm going to be flying soon. No, I'm just kidding. I just live right by an airport, so that's what's happening. But yeah, until then, please be safe, everybody.
You've been listening to the Jabberjaw Podcast Network, jabberjawmedia.com. Shh.
Hey, Miles.
Yes.
It's Jack from work.
Yes, hi.
Did you know that we host a daily news and culture podcast where people can go to get caught up on what is happening?
Are you confused about that? You're talking about the Daily Zeitgeist.
I just wanted to make sure you knew and that everybody knew that you could listen to us every day, twice a day, talk about what is happening, and they could learn everything without feeling the life drained from their soul.
Yeah, I think at the Daily Zeitgeist, we like to give people a balance of just enough news that they feel informed and just enough laughs that they're not overwhelmed and can have a decent day after listening.
So guys, listen to the Daily Zeitgeist on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever fine podcasts are given away for free.
When the world gets in the way of your music, try the new Bose Quiet Comfort earbuds 2. Next-gen earbuds uniquely tuned to the shape of your ears. They use exclusive Bose technology that personalizes the audio performance to fit you, delivering the world's best noise cancellation and powerfully immersive sound, so you can hear and feel every detail of the music you love. Bose Quiet Comfort Earbuds 2. Sound shaped to you. To learn more, visit Bose.com.